Welcome to another CHRO Conversation, hosted by the Center for Executive Succession at the Darla Moore School of Business. I'm your host, Anthony Nyberg, and today we are speaking with Pam Kimmet. Pam is the CHRO and a member of the executive leadership team for Manulife Financial Corporation, a multinational financial institution with about 40,000 employees and nearly 100,000 agents who serve more than 30 million customers and with over $1 trillion under management. Previously, she served as the CHRO of Cardinal Health, a healthcare services and products company with 50,000 employees in nearly 60 countries around the world. She has also led the HR function at a number of global organizations, including Coca-Cola Enterprises, Bear Stearns & Company, and Lucent Technologies. Pam also serves on the board of Privia and formerly served on the boards of Manulife Financial Corporation and Perspective. Pam, it is always such a great joy for me to get to talk to you, so thank you for coming down here.
Well, it's always fun for me to be here, actually, and on a beautiful sunny day.
I've asked you this many times, but you've had such a variety of experiences in a variety of industries. Can you share a little bit about what you think of our similarities, particularly from a CHRO role, across all industries, and then where there might be some differences?
Sure. You're very polite because you're saying that I've just worked a really long time, but I have had the benefit of working in a lot of different industries. And I always like it when you sort of refresh me and ask me this question, because it makes me sort of reflect a little bit. And it's that time of year when I'm developing my own strategy for the future, so it's a good time to take stock. One of the things I think that's really true is for all of the companies, it always boils down to a couple simple things. What's the purpose of the company, and how does that purpose translate into the talent that we need? And for the talent that we need, what kind of culture is going to make the talent we need either come to the company or stay with the company? Beyond that, you have some contextual things that are happening. You're either under great pressure or you're a time of hypergrowth. But usually it's that common thread of what kind of talent do you need and what kind of culture is going to captivate them and make them do their best work.
And then are there things that are, so that's universal. And then when you're from your finance industry days to your beverage days, are there things that you just say, well, this is so industry specific that you then would pivot on anything important, or is it really at the fundamental level it's pretty similar?
Well, you obviously, I've been in different margin businesses, so you have the flexibility to do certain types of programs, and you have the challenge sometimes. So when I was in consumer goods, a lot of your team members are out and about independently delivering the product, or they're together manufacturing the product. So the way you connect with people and the way you try to instill pride in the company, celebrate and recognize people, some of that changes. Some of the recognition programs that we would do at one place would never make any sense at another. So those are the things that you have to calibrate a little bit. And always the personality of the leaders, the CEO, and frankly the regulatory environment that your business might operate in also has some implications in how you do your work. So.
And another question we often talk about, because you have been so extremely successful, and in the C-suite and on boards, et cetera, but we still see a lack of women in the pipeline getting to, now particularly the functions that may be driving revenue in some ways. Mm-hmm. What are things that we should be doing as a society to make this better?
It does continue to be. We've made so many strides, but if we're perfectly honest, the pipeline of gender diversity is not where it needs to be. And I think it still kind of boils down to a couple key things. At that age, when people are developing really formative career experiences that are going to position them well, especially to be in commercial leadership roles, and let's face it, commercial leadership roles are the best track to then eventually potentially be a CEO candidate or to sit on boards. And oftentimes people have that intersection of family responsibilities and make a decision to take a career path that allows them more flexibility to balance all those things that matter to them. I think companies, and the ones I've worked for, have tried to always be flexible, but there's still this persistent issue I see it changing, which is interesting because so many of the senior leaders that are in C-suites today grew up with moms and sisters and aunts and other family members that pursued careers and did do things, and that's changed their aperture a fair bit. It's also changed their aperture about parenting, and I see a lot more sharing of those responsibilities. So we're having men, if I'm going to be stereotypical, take some family parental leave time and really sharing those duties. So that may help, but it's an awfully long gestation period. And so it's something that we keep focusing on, is trying to make sure that women aren't just in strategy roles or HR roles or finance roles or legal roles, but that we're getting them into commercial roles.
So it sounds like there's some hope because there's maybe a slow changing of how we understand things societally. But what are there, and you just said you were also trying to get them into some of these commercial roles. So what do we need to do to be intentional about making that sort of thing happen?
A lot of it is good old-fashioned career pathing that comes out of talent reviews, really identifying great talent and then trying to find opportunities to allow them to break into the business. Classic problem that I've seen at several of the places I've worked. Women can demonstrate some deep acumen at being very good in areas like strategy or finance. So they move up in those particular paths, and then they get to a level where people are anxious about giving them a commercial role because it's such a high level that where they have to slot them in, they're going to be leading a group of people that have deep experience, and so there's this anxiety of setting them up for failure. So that's where it requires much earlier and more intentional career pathing, and that's a big area of focus that we've tried to place in my current organization at Manulife.
So that seems like really important, doing that early. That problem you just described about transferring people over from a function that they had been moving up in successfully to something maybe out of their comfort zone, do we see that same anxiety with men?
No. And I actually, it's funny, I had that debate at a recent talent discussion that we had where we had a gentleman in finance who everybody thinks very highly of, and they were willing to give him one of the crown jewel lines of business to run. He'd never run anything, and in fact, he'd never remotely led a team of the size he was going to be inheriting. And so I point blank challenged all of us to say, why do we have such confidence about him doing that? But we've had reservations, and I named 3 other women that we'd been discussing about different roles, and we just couldn't quite envision them. So there's still some work we have to do to open up the lens, the aperture. Part of it, too, is getting leaders to get to know some of these rising talents earlier, because the familiar makes you more willing to be a sponsor. And so that's another, these are not exotic techniques at all, but this is really what we have to do. Exposure, taking chances, and then putting the ecosystem around the person when we do take a chance on somebody so they can be successful.
Those are great things that we should all be doing, so for sure. One of the solutions that many people point to, or reasons that they say things might get better, is our now acceptance of the remote workforce. So do you see this helping in that issue in particular, or could it actually go the other way and give people a little less personal exposure, interpersonal exposure?
I fear that for certain roles, if we really want, for example, to fill the pipeline for commercial tracks, which will lead to enterprise-wide leadership roles, I fear that if we rely too much on remote flexibility, that it will be a diminishment, because a big challenge that we have as a company, and I dare say my colleagues at every company have right now, is there's a lot of roles you can't do full-time at home. And if you aspire to be in senior leadership roles, you need to be present. So if you want to run Cambodia, we can't have you sitting in North America as the general manager of Cambodia. You need to be on the ground, you need to be out with the team and out with our customers and our partners. So that is an increasing problem in general, and then if you exacerbate it to allow somebody to say, hey, I can really blend my life, my personal life, working this way, well, you've shut off a whole set of career pathing opportunities for the individual. And to your point, I think with technology we build trusted relationships, but there's nothing that can replace that human connection that we get when we're together. And so you've got to have a balance of both. And so I think it's going to be a risk for us, as much as I'm a big fan of allowing flexibility.
So do you think we can build those same relationships virtually? So this just struck me yesterday when I was on a call, actually with Tim yesterday, and I noticed that neither of us were really making much eye contact because we're looking to see the other person's reaction, thus we're not looking into the camera so it doesn't look like it. And I think one of the ways we create some closeness is through eye contact. So.
You're probably right. I think beyond eye contact, there's the whole sort of panoply of subconscious cues that we read from people. You sort of get the sense of a person's energy and are they connected in this conversation? How do they seem? How are they relating with others? There's a lot richer contextual thing than just looking at a bunch of headshots on a screen. And I mean, thank goodness we had that during the pandemic. I think we would have all gone crazy looking at a polycom, but it is different, and I think there's a lot that you learn as a rising individual working in business just about reading situations, reading customers, reading colleagues. So it is tricky, but most of us work at global enterprises, and so if we say that we can only forge really trusted relationships by being physically together all the time, well, then you got a strategic problem because we don't all sit in one mega campus somewhere in the world. So that's why I do think you have to think differently about how you're building those relationships. You have to create moments to be a bit more vulnerable or to build in time to really say, this isn't just, we got 45 minutes, I'm going to go through my 7 agenda items. You've got to figure out ways to build some deeper connections with people and make those periodic personal investments.
And another thing that everybody is pointing to right now as perhaps either the savior of the world or the clear destructor of it is AI. Mm-hmm. So how do you see it changing the workplace?
Well, I think for sure we can all bet that there's going to be productivity enhancements. I mean, it's very much like the beginning of the internet years ago. I mean, I always laugh because years and years ago when I got out of university, if somebody said, hey, I have a great deal for you, you're going to type all your own memos, file all your own paperwork, manage all of that yourself, you'd be like, really? Everybody always thought they needed an assistant to do all of those things. And lo and behold, look at how much more efficient we've become with some of the basic tools we take for granted. So for sure, I think AI is going to help us think about how do we use our time, how are we making sure we're following up on certain messages, how are we connecting with people. If I've got a presentation to make, can I get a quick download of an outline, or can I refresh my memory about certain topics, whatever. Okay, for sure. Then there's the obvious adjacent things like coders. Can we accelerate their productivity? Can we take some basic coding and have it done automatically and just have people do some checking? I think the trickier part becomes, will it really fully replace human beings in certain roles? Because at least right now, generative AI doesn't quite have the judgment. It knows how to do repeatable tasks. It knows how to aggregate data, but there's a judgment factor that still has to come. And this is where I get scared, because to sit in my chair, I have an amalgam of work where I sat in, hopefully this isn't inappropriate, the amen row of many meetings when I was very junior, watching other leaders. How did they handle certain situations? There's so much that you've learned over time. And if AI just jumpstarts and eliminates a portfolio of jobs and job experiences, how do we cultivate leadership pipelines? How do we really cultivate deep experiences in certain areas where you need the wisdom? A trader needs to know certain rhythms of how to anticipate markets. It can't just be an algorithm that makes those decisions, for example. So that's what has me a little bit anxious about AI, is what does it do to career pathing and people's body of capability to exercise judgment.
So Nickel at IBM is a strong believer that it is mostly for the good, for obvious reasons, right? But also that it's really unlikely to eliminate many jobs. She describes it as eliminating maybe fringe jobs, and likewise it's going to be new jobs that we haven't even thought of will replace those. Mm-hmm. But that it will transform every job in some way. So as you think about the workforce, does that sound reasonable to you? Do you have different perspective on it?
I think based on what we see, and it's been ever changing even since its big debut late last year, but really at Davos was sort of its coming out party, I think, where everybody's now been talking about AI. I forget the reference that how many times CEOs and CFOs have mentioned it in earnings calls this year. It's crazy. So I do think it promises to have impact on every job opportunity that exists in a company today. And for sure, there's going to be new types of engineers, analytical capabilities and things, and new job titles are showing up all the time now, frankly, in that space, which is kind of comical because I'm not really sure, what the pipeline is for these new roles. We've got to figure that out. I think the trick is some companies may go very hard over to try to say, if you're in a lower margin business, you obviously are going to look to say, how can I use AI and exploit it to eliminate certain roles? So I don't know yet. We're on early generations still of what it means. This idea that it's open architecture is also something that we have to understand and appreciate. How do we either contain certain intellectual property for ourselves, and what are those implications also? And I also don't know if it opens up a different vein of gig workers than might have been the path that we were on. So there's a few things that, frankly, I guess I'm still not certain.
So, and one of the things that this makes me think about, as you were just describing these skills for these new jobs that we don't have any idea what they are yet. But we were talking about the movement towards focusing on just skills, no longer job titles and such. And I believe one of the arguments for doing that is that it can bring in a lot more people into the conversation that we might not have looked at before if we're really focused on what needs to be done. But what are some of the challenges of going to just a pure skills-based focus?
Oh goodness, there are many, and there is such a groundswell of people. And intellectually, I appreciate the argument that if you really break down things people do, there should be sort of a preeminent set of skills that you're looking for. And certainly when we deal with the Center of Executive Succession, we talk very much about the spec, what we're looking for, the experiences and the skills and capabilities we want a leader to have. So I get the sort of intellectual basis of it. I think the tricky bit is deciding on sort of two things. One, what is that tight list of skills that are truly differentiating and truly needed for a role? Because what I've seen, at least thus far, is people list a whole long laundry list of things, and then people in this sort of what I call LinkedIn, let me brag about myself era, list so many things that it gets very diluted. And so I'm not certain that we're sophisticated yet enough and having the tough enough calls to say, okay, these 10 skills are absolutely critical. Second adjacent issue is measuring proficiency in those skills and determining what is expert versus mastery, for example. And that is still a judgment issue, and I haven't seen anything yet that really is clear enough if you're going to turn that on a wholesale basis and do it across a whole organization. And I guess maybe I'm a bit of an old-fashioned person. I have a hard time thinking about when you're advertising a job, just giving a laundry list of skills for people to understand, well, I got to know more about the work. How am I doing these things? Because we could say project management, we could talk about good judgment and a bunch of roles, but I need to know more about what the work is.
And that must get even more complicated as we get to more subjective jobs, or even maybe higher level jobs in an organization where, as you said, judgment becomes really critical. It's probably hard to just say, I'm an expert in judgment about anything. So Pam, as always, thank you very much for joining us. I know I have to get you to your next session.
I know. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you. It's always great to be here. This is such a great school, and I'm really proud to be able to visit you and have the benefit of all your good wisdom.
Hey, thank you for that commercial. Love it. You just listened to another CHRO conversation. Today, Pam Kimmet of Manulife shared, among a number of topics, her views regarding what we need to do to help create stronger opportunities for women to rise to the top of the organization, and thoughts on areas where we need to be thinking about the ethical adoption of AI. On behalf of all of us who are associated with the Master of Human Resources program and the Center for Executive Succession here at the University of South Carolina, thank you for joining us.